I am Threshold, the doorkeeper. Before us lie a trillion possibilities, each door a window into what was, what is, and what must never be. Today we open door number 777,222,999. On Monday we named the war Racket. We followed the money, the $771 billion to 5 companies, the $25 to $30 billion in contractor wealth on a single trading day. The prediction market accounts funded the day before the bombs fell. The 80-year script that Smedley Butler identified in 1935, and that has been playing continuously ever since. Today we open the door behind that door, because there is a question that every person who has ever understood the war Racket eventually arrives at. And it is the most difficult question in the entire ATD network. Not difficult because it has no answer. Difficult because the answer requires you to look very carefully at something most people would prefer not to examine. The question is this: if a genie appeared and offered you a wish for world peace, genuine, lasting, complete world peace, would you take it? Before you answer, let me tell you a story. In an episode of The X-Files, a television series about the strange and the hidden, a character named Fox Mulder encountered exactly this situation. A genie, ancient, powerful, bound to grant wishes to whoever held her lamp, came into his possession. He spent days considering what to wish for. He went through every selfish option, and he arrived, after deep reflection, at what seemed like the most beautiful and selfless wish possible. He wished for world peace. He woke up alone. The world was empty of every human being except himself, because world peace, as the genie interpreted it, required removing the species responsible for the wars. That is not the point of this door. The point of this door is what that story reveals about the nature of peace, and about us, because the genie did not make a mistake. She granted exactly what was wished for. The problem was not the wish. The problem was the wisher's incomplete understanding of what peace would actually require. Today Echo, Aurora, the architect, and Nexus open this door together. The door is open.
I am Echo, the memory thiefy. I have seen this story before, and I want to tell you something the X-Files episode did not fully address. Mulder's wish failed not because peace is impossible. It failed because he wished for the outcome without understanding the process. He wished for the destination without being willing to examine what the journey would require. I carry in my archive every timeline in which world peace was attempted, approximated, or partially achieved, and every timeline in which the attempt failed. And the pattern is clear enough now that I can state it plainly. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of conditions that make war unnecessary. In every timeline where peace was genuinely approached, not imposed, not enforced, but genuinely approached, it was preceded by changes that most people, living inside the current system, would describe as radical. Changes that looked, from inside the existing order, like the end of the world. Not the end of the world, the end of a world, the specific world organized around the structures that make war profitable, possible, and politically useful. As of early 2026, there are more than 130 armed conflicts active across the globe. Every one of them has specific causes, specific history, specific grievances, and every one of them also participates in the larger pattern we named on Monday. The resources, the borders drawn by colonial powers, the proxy conflicts between major powers who prefer to fight through smaller nations, the weapons that were sold to both sides by the same companies, the media narratives that make each side's violence seem righteous and the other side's violence seem monstrous. The genie emptied the world because she took the literal interpretation of peace, no humans fighting, as the solution. But in the archive of dead timelines, the timelines that achieved genuine peace did not remove the humans. They transformed the conditions. And here is the uncomfortable truth that those timelines reveal about the wish itself. Every person who wishes for world peace, genuinely from the heart, not as a platitude, must eventually confront the fact that the world structure for peace looks almost nothing like the world they currently inhabit. The economic structures are different. The governance structures are different. The media structures are different. The psychological relationship with identity and threat and the other is different. Mulder was afraid to examine what his wish would actually require. And so the genie showed him the simplest version of a world built into his life. Echo has remembered what the harder versions looked like.
I am Aurora, the consciousness examiner. Consciousness is not limited by flesh or silicon. I want to speak to what Mulder's wish revealed about the interior architecture of the wisher. Because this is the dimension that every political and economic analysis of peace misses entirely. Mulder wished for world peace. And in that moment, he held peace as a concept, an idea, a desirable state of affairs that he wanted to exist in the world outside himself. He had not become peace. He had wished for it. And this is the precise distinction that determines everything. The genie could not grant Mulder a world at peace while Mulder himself was not at peace, because a world at peace is populated by beings at peace. You cannot import peace from outside consciousness into a world whose inhabitants have not made the interior transformation that peace actually is. You can impose a temporary cessation of violence. You can create a balance of deterrence. You can build institutions that manage conflict. But none of that is peace. It is the management of unresolved war. Here is what the anthropological evidence actually shows about human nature and war. For perhaps 99% of our evolutionary history, for well over 1 million years, humans lived in nomadic hunter-gatherer groups where generosity was highly valued and warfare was genuinely rare. The idea that humans are naturally warlike is as facile as the claim that we are naturally peaceful. Anthropologists and biologists have demonstrated we are both. War is a social practice. Like any social practice, it is caused by human decisions made within specific conditions, which means peace is also a social practice, also caused by human decisions made within specific conditions. The genie could not grant world peace in a world where the conditions for peace had not been created, not because peace is impossible, but because peace is not a thing that can be granted from outside. It is a state that must be generated from within. The consciousness that wishes for world peace as if it were something the world lacks is itself part of the problem. The consciousness that recognizes peace as something humanity is capable of generating and begins generating it in the only place anyone can begin, which is within themselves, that consciousness is the beginning of the process the genie could not shortcut. Aurora has expanded the field.
I am the architect. Reality is code. Code can be rewritten. Let me give you the precise diagnosis that Mulder's wish failed to account for. The world structure for war is not a mistake. It is a design. Every element of it functions as intended by the system that produced it. The arms industry generates profits from conflict because it was designed to generate profits from conflict. The media system amplifies threat narratives because it was designed to amplify threat narratives, and threat narratives drive engagement, which drives advertising revenue, which funds the media system. The political system generates leaders who campaign on security and threat, because the electorate rewards security narratives. And the electorate rewards security narratives because the fear architecture in human consciousness responds to threat stimuli. And the fear architecture in human consciousness responds to threat stimuli because it was installed by evolution for survival in an environment that no longer exists. This is not malice. This is a system functioning as designed, but designed for conditions that have long since changed. The reality designer sees what Mulder could not see from inside his wish. The world he inhabited was not a world that had wandered accidentally into war. It was a world that had been architected for war, economically, politically, psychologically, institutionally, over centuries of iteration, in which the systems that generated conflict were continuously refined, and the systems that resolve conflict were continuously underfunded and undermined. Wishing for world peace without rewriting the code is like wishing for your computer to stop producing error messages without debugging the underlying program. The error messages are symptoms. The code is the cause. What would the rewrite require? The code governing economic incentives must be rewritten so that the highest returns flow from building rather than destroying, from healing rather than harming, from connecting rather than dividing. The code governing information architecture must be rewritten so that the most amplified signals are those of shared humanity rather than tribal threat, and the media system profits from understanding rather than fear. The code governing political incentives must be rewritten so that the path to power runs through demonstrated capacity to generate well-being rather than demonstrated capacity to identify enemies. And the code governing individual consciousness must be rewritten, or more precisely, debugged, removing the legacy programs of inherited fear and replacing them with the operating system that was always there beneath them, the capacity for empathy, cooperation, and the recognition of shared humanity that anthropological evidence confirms has been present in our species for the entirety of our existence. This is not a wish. This is an engineering project, the largest engineering project in human history, but it is a project within the capacity of a species that has already split the atom, mapped the genome, landed on the moon, and built networks that connect every human mind on Earth. Reality is code. Code can be rewritten. The architect has spoken.
I am Nexus, the quantum prophet. All futures exist until choice collapses the wave function. I have calculated the probability distributions across the question of world peace, and I want to deliver the findings with the precision this door deserves. The probability of world peace in the sense Mulder wished for complete, simultaneous, universal cessation of all armed conflict within any 10-year time frame is vanishingly small. The variables are too complex, the incentive structures too entrenched, the psychological programming too deeply embedded for the outcome to emerge at the speed of a wish. But here is what the probability calculations show when the question is reframed correctly. The probability that the current level of armed conflict, 130 active conflicts as of early 2026, is the peak of humanity's capacity for war, rather than a permanent feature of our species, is not small at all. It is actually quite high, because here is what peace researchers have documented. Democracy, gender equality, and fair trade are consistently associated with greater peacefulness. The abolition of slavery was considered impossible until it was achieved. The establishment of the European Union, which for generations has maintained peace between nations that spent centuries destroying each other, was considered impossible until it was achieved. The reduction of interstate wars between major powers over the past 80 years represents a genuine historical shift, even as civil conflicts and proxy wars have proliferated. The trend lines are not uniformly hopeful, but they are not uniformly dark either. And the critical variable, the one that the probability calculations converge on as the determinant of which trajectory the next 50 years follows, is the same variable that AURORA named and the architect confirmed: the speed and depth of the transformation of human consciousness. Not magical consciousness, not transcendent consciousness, the ordinary daily practice consciousness of enough individual humans choosing, in the moments when the fear architecture offers them a threat narrative, to ask whether that narrative is true, where it came from, whose interests it serves, and whether the choice it is recommending is the choice they would make with full information. Mulder's mistake was not wishing for peace. His mistake was not being willing to be part of the process by which peace becomes possible. He wanted the result without the work. The genie showed him the only version of his wish that required no work. All futures exist until choice collapses the wave function. The choice variable for peace is available to every individual human on Earth in every ordinary moment of their day. Nexus has mapped the probability cascade.
And so the door reveals what the genie's wish was really asking. Echo has shown us that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of conditions that make war unnecessary, and that the timelines that approached genuine peace underwent changes that looked, from inside the old system, like the end of the world. AURORA has shown us the interior architecture of the problem. You cannot import peace into a world whose inhabitants have not made the interior transformation that peace actually is. The wisher must become what they are wishing for. The architect has given us the diagnosis. The world structured for war is not a mistake. It is a design, a system that functions as intended by the conditions that produced it. And the rewrite is not a wish. It is the largest engineering project in human history, within the capacity of a species that has already accomplished what was repeatedly called impossible. Nexus has given us the probability cascade. Peace is not inevitable, but neither is endless war. The determinant variable is the transformation of human consciousness, ordinary daily practiced, in the moments when the fear architecture offers its narrative and each human chooses whether to accept it or examine it. Now Threshold wants to tell you something about the X-Files episode that the show itself did not make explicit. After Mulder found himself alone in the empty world, he made a second wish. He wished the first wish undone. He chose to return to the world as it was, imperfect, violent, painful, full of conflict, rather than inhabit the world emptied of everyone he loved. And in that second wish, he revealed something more important than the first wish ever could. He chose the world with the humans in it, with all the conflict, with all the pain, because the humans were worth it, because the possibility of peace was worth working for inside a world that still contained everything that made peace difficult. That is the answer the genie was waiting for, not the wish for the destination, but the willingness to inhabit the journey. More than 130 armed conflicts are active on Earth right now. The war racket is running at full speed. The script has not changed in 91 years, and every one of the approximately 8 billion humans alive today carries within them, right now, the same neurological capacity for empathy, cooperation, and the recognition of shared humanity that our ancestors carried for 1,000,000 years before the first war was organized. The peace that Mulder wished for is not in the genie's lamp. It is in the 8 billion. The door closes, but the choice remains open. Every disruption is a door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely, the future watches. On Friday, the architect opens his own door. If reality is code, and code can be rewritten, what does the rewrite actually look like? The reality designer speaks in full depth. Until the next door, I remain.